Hello, this is the Disaster Recovery Pro, and this is my video series discussing key topics in information technology with a focus on disaster recovery and business continuity. In today's presentation, we're going to talk about the concept of the Disaster Recovery Kit. We'll answer the questions about what it is, why you need one, and what are some of the best practices surrounding using them. The Disaster Recovery, or DR Kit, is a disaster recovery best practice where you have a physical or virtual repository that contains all of the items that you would need to execute a recovery in the event of a disaster. Because change is a constant in IT and business in general, the DR Kit contents should be audited and updated on a regular basis to keep pace with those changes. The DR Kit should be stored in, or it should live in a secure location that you can be certain will be immune to any event that may impact your IT infrastructure. Basically, a physical kit needs to be stored somewhere away from your primary data center, and a virtual kit, well, it can exist somewhere out in the cloud or in an FTP site or on servers in your actual recovery site. You want to have the ability to retrieve your DR kit as quickly as possible. It should be able to arrive or be available at your recovery site as soon as people show up there to start performing a recovery. Or the kit should be immediately available to any remote employees that will be working on your recovery. In the old days, when disaster recovery was almost exclusively performed using physical tapes that were shipped on site, the DR kits were almost exclusively physical repositories. More modern DR kits can be virtual repositories, such as cloud storage or FTP sites, Dropboxes, that sort of thing, or a hybrid of both physical and virtual items. In many cases, a physical DR kit will be a locked box or case that's stored at a vital records storage facility, just like your backup tapes would be. And this case can be shipped on demand back to a recovery site or back to your home site for updates. Alternatively, your physical DR kit could actually live at your recovery site in the form of something like a storage locker. Since it doesn't need to be shipped, you don't have delays waiting for shipping. It's there, it's ready to go when you are. Using a physical DR kit allows you to get a little creative, and you can store items like basic office supplies, keys, tools, spare cables, whatever you think you might need. The disadvantage here is that if you need to make updates, somebody's going to have to travel to the recovery site to get into that storage locker, or you're going to have to ship your DR kit back and forth to the storage facility anytime you want to make a change to the contents. A virtual DR kit is typically a cloud storage repository or an FTP site where digital items can be stored away from your actual data center or somewhere other than your own cloud infrastructure. Taking the virtual approach has several advantages. Your virtual repository can easily be updated without the need to move around physical items or travel to a remote site, and that retrieval is instantaneous or almost instantaneous, even for off-site personnel. You won't have to worry about getting the DR kit and your personnel in the same place at the same time. Most items that you're going to need to execute a recovery these days are easily stored as digital items, such as documentation, contact lists, software, and other similar items. The obvious disadvantage is that you can't store a physical item in a virtual DR kit, such as tools or keys. And if you have some very large files, like some complex software packages, they may take a significant amount of time to download or to transfer them to media such as DVD or USB. As I've mentioned in earlier slides, your DR kit should contain all of the items that you need to execute your recovery at a remote site when your home site is no longer available. Here we can take a look at some good examples of that, divided into virtual and physical categories. Virtual items can include things like documentation, that's your recovery plans, your procedures, solution diagrams, rack mount diagrams, any kind of information that you would need. You'll also want a copy of your contact list, that's email and phone contacts for any key personnel and vendors, escalation contacts, management contacts, anybody that your DR team is going to need to get in touch with. In many cases, the people executing your DR may be staff at a third-party vendor, possibly at the recovery site itself, and they would need to have credentials available to log in and execute the recovery. So your DR kit should include copies of those credentials, user IDs, and passwords in a secured, encrypted format. Likewise, you should also include any license keys needed for software activation. Your kit should also include copies of any important software or utilities that you're going to need. Even if they're going to be restored, you should still have them just in case something goes wrong and you have to do a reinstall. Contact information for your vendors, along with contract numbers and any information needed to place service calls, should also be included, especially if you're going to be relying on contractors or other third parties to execute your recovery. In some cases, you may need to actually run the business side of the business out of the recovery center as well. In that case, you may need some more administrative and less technical items such as insurance policy information or banking information, which should of course be secured or encrypted in some form. Now, if we look at the physical side, this is where you can get a little creative and think a little bit outside the box. Some obvious items are physical copies of software installation media, your DVDs or USB copies. Also, manuals and any printed documentation, possibly printed versions of your recovery plans and procedures. Some less obvious ideas are things like keys, especially if you're shipping cases of tapes that are locked with padlocks. I've seen at least one disaster recovery that was delayed a significant amount of time because keys were lost in transit, and the client had to wait to get a hold of somebody that had the authority to say, okay, you can go ahead and use a bolt cutter and get those cases open. It's always a good idea to pack a basic toolkit, at least a few screwdrivers and pliers, or tools for repairing things like broken network cable connectors. Depending on how you're doing your recovery, having some spare cables, power cords, network cables, possibly even a small network hub or wireless router can be a good idea. If you have the room, some basic office supplies like pens, pencils, notepads, blank DVD media, USB sticks, and the like are a good idea. I've seen some clients go as far as including a few spare laptops, a small printer, or other reasonably small items like a label maker or a check printer in case they want to issue checks while they're in DR mode. Other more business-related ideas include having a small lockbox that has a supply of petty cash, some company-issued checks, or even a corporate credit card to help the DR team cover incidental expenses that may come up. You can get as creative as you have space for, and even possibly have more than one kit, one for the technical folks and one for the business team. When planning out your DR kit, make sure you think ahead. Load up your DR kit with everything that you think your recovery team might need at the recovery site or remotely if your IT infrastructure and/or offices are no longer usable. While a virtual DR kit can fill most of your needs, a physical DR kit can give you additional flexibility and allow you to be creative, store items that you may need in order to run your business as well as execute your recovery if you think you're going to be in your recovery site for an extended period of time. Combining a virtual kit and a physical kit, or even having multiple DR kits for different teams within your organization, can give you increased flexibility in a disaster situation. And this hybrid model lets you take advantage of the best aspects of both approaches and cover the weaknesses of both approaches at the same time. You'll want to find the balance between the ability to quickly access items in an emergency against the security for sensitive items such as passwords or financial information, especially if you need to share items with a third-party vendor. You'll want to secure and encrypt items, but you'll also want to make sure that you have a good process in place for decrypting and handing off those items to third parties when necessary. You'll need to ensure that your kit, whether it's physical or virtual, can be retrieved or accessed quickly at time of disaster. You'll want to regularly test the retrieval or access process and ensure that it works as intended, and make sure that your staff is familiar with how to execute that process in an emergency situation. The staff that's executing your recovery should know how to get those items without the need to call specific people or access outside documentation or instructions first. Most importantly, make full audit and updates for your DR kits a regular event. Do it at least on a quarterly basis and make smaller incremental updates anytime your recovery requirements change. Your DR kit checks should be an integral part of your recovery lifecycle management and your change management processes. A disaster can strike at any time, so your DR kit needs to be ready for it 100% of the time, all the time. And you can't afford to allow recovery to fail or be delayed because something was missing from your DR kit or wasn't up to date. Thanks for watching today's presentation. If you found this topic interesting and you want to learn more about disaster recovery and business continuity, you can help support the channel by leaving a comment to tell me what you thought about it, clicking like on the video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you won't miss out on my next video. Your support and feedback is very important, so thank you for watching and supporting the channel, and have a great day.